getting rid of this COVID situation. And here we go, game 2.
Here we go, game 2, and we have started with the king's pawn again. So white opening, and okay, we don't see the Spanish this time, we see the Italian game. This is how they battled several times in the New in Chess Classic last month, but it's also how they battled yesterday or in the prelims of this event. So what will Magnus come up with from the white side? He's had a decent amount of success with this opening against Nakamura. Everybody seems to play against Nakamura these days. He's very predictable in this opening, but okay, Magnus coming up with the first small surprise, just pushing his corner pawn there, just covering some squares. That's a very useful move in general. It's rare to see it this early. Usually white maybe wants to develop some pieces, wants to control the center, but Nakamura, when in doubt, just play copycat.
The corner pawn is actually a bit of a speciality of Magnus. He has played it about 6 or 7 times.
And usually in the Italian game, which is characterized by those bishops we see on the left side, by the development of those bishops, normally it comes down to maneuvering. Lots of different move orders. I always get so confused when I'm trying to study this opening, which pawn should go where and in what order. Now Nakamura gains space on the other side of the board, just controlling some squares, also creating an escape route for the black bishop to retreat to. Now Magnus jumps forward in the center. Nakamura, he plays tens of thousands of games per year online. And all of these openings, there's so many different move order nuances. They all kind of blend into one eventually. He does repeat what he did last time, the black bishop stepping back, and now Magnus says, you go back, I'm going to go forwards. And Magnus bringing his bishop out this time. So Nakamura, well, I was going to say, well, is Caruana...
Yes, and
Caruana's game.
Nakamura is repeating exactly what he did against Fabiano Caruana. And you can see that Magnus is so not phased. He is just letting... Yep, and again, Hikaru is repeating, and totally the same.
White bringing his knight forward. Temporarily, white was 1 pawn up, but we did see that black did retreat with his knight, now controlling a very nice central outpost with the black knight. And he's still looking down, trying to remember things. He just needs to play the position afresh, completely reset. And look, we're getting that variation I showed on the board a few moments ago. Nakamura, he found his courage. He allowed this sacrifice. I'm going to defend. And will we see that backfire? Magnus, look at the clock situation. Magnus has gained time. He's gained 1.5 minutes. For sure, he has studied this, actually this morning. And that's very brave by Nakamura to allow it.
So it's kind of quite an interesting pause for Magnus here. So do you think that he's calculating out all the possibilities, or is he simply just intuitively finding the right way to pressure? Okay, so the rook, well...
we did mention he loves his rook lifts. Yeah, right now, the black bishop has had to step back, as we mentioned. Nakamura reacting slightly. We're not sure why. But now we see Magnus, he brings his rook across. I was expecting the knight to jump in to attack that bishop, but this looks pretty strong as well.
I totally agree with you. I mean, if you look at black's extra piece, OK, we're going to see it on the board. So Hikaru retreats the knight, and
Magnus is also ice cold. He just retreats his rook 1 square. It does look like black's trying to defend, but white has so many threats.
Play a move, and you immediately see that it loses in the most natural... Well, having said that, Hikaru does find the top computer suggestion. He has moved his rook to the middle of the board. And how is Magnus going to fight this?
But he was just very relieved and very happy that he made it through, right?
Yeah, and the same with Nepomniachtchi. Yeah. Both of these guys were so relieved to be in the knockout stages. It was so nice to see their smiles and delights. And we do have a move. So Magnus not attacking the... Well, he's delaying the attack on the bishop. Instead, he chooses to exchange knights, and now this really deadly bishop retreat is coming, and Hikaru has problems on his hands.
On that square, so Nakamura slightly grimacing. He does put that knight, he does retreat that knight. I mentioned earlier that rhyme, knights on f8, there is no mate. So we're going to find out the truth.
You want to really attack that light square bishop. So one move that kind of springs to mind is like pushing Harry. Another one is to jump into the center with a knight. So
which he does.
Okay, which he does.
Yeah, so Magnus, I was going to say, you can't really do anything in that position. You ask some material down, you have to keep Well, I was told that attacking, when I was young, I was told that attacking is like riding a bike. You have to keep pedaling, otherwise you'll just fall off. And therefore, Magnus, he does start to create the threats. I think any of those moves would have been good enough, but it's still not over. You still have to be super accurate here. And that knight now is eyeing up that black bishop. White has 4 pieces attacking the same bishop. Strong attacking knight, or he can play this move. He can defend his bishop from the side with his rook. White does have... Okay, he attacks the black rook first. Okay, that black rook most likely will just sidestep. So black's defending it only 3 times, white attacking 4 times. That means you can cash in, you can take on that square, and at the very end you win a pawn just to prove a piece, but that would be slightly slow. It would give black a couple of moves to bring more pieces to the defense. So Magnus decides that's the moment. He takes the bishop. Finally, that bishop, it was living on borrowed time. It was destined to fall eventually, and now Magnus Carlsen, he has taken again on that square. White is actually threatening checkmate in a couple of moves, so black has to trade pieces to make sure his king survives. Black's king hiding in the center now after some trades. If we do a quick count, white has 3 pawns for a bishop. So bishop worth 3 pawns, yeah, roughly balanced material. But look how bare that black king is. No protection around it at all. He probably wishes that Magnus was low on the clock as well, so that he couldn't find the right moment to bring that rook in. But Magnus just giving some checks, gaining a bit of time on the clock, asking the black king where it's going.
OK, well, he's actually made a move, and he's put his king on the edge of the board. OK, we don't need to bring up the analysis board, because Magnus is going to show it.
Let's show it. OK, this white rook is going to do the final job. If you could imagine picking up this rook and planting it on this square, this would be checkmate. So that's why Magnus, he's aiming towards that square. Well, he found a route in for the rook. He's going to try and do another rook lift. We mentioned this earlier. He knows all about rook lifts. And Nakamura setting a small trap. He brought his rook in so that if Magnus now puts his rook on the wrong square, if he brings it to this one, trying to give checkmate, then suddenly Nakamura would counterattack. He would give a check. The white king would hide. And suddenly, pin. There's a pin along this diagonal. The white rook would be lost. That's why Magnus found a better square for his rook. He's lifted his rook to this square. Checkmate is coming now. He put his rook on the opposite colour from the opponent's bishop. Let's go back to the players. Checkmate is coming.
OK.
Yeah, I mean, I think both players, they have been the masters of their own demise in the last couple of games. So, yeah, for sure, black is struggling in this match. It's just a struggle to get out of the opening. And Nakamura, he's just trying to find one final trick, but he just resigns, about to get checkmated. Magnus Carlsen looking happy there with the head bob.
Wow, it's a comeback from Magnus Carlsen. After losing the first game, he's coming back in the second one with the white pieces winning.